It's a disorder that develops slowly and leaves family members feeling helpless.
We're talking about Parkinson's disease, which has no cure. A local high school senior is doing incredible work to try and help families struggling with this difficult disease.
She spends her time at 2 different high schools and in a research lab. As Janue found out, it's led her to an amazing scientific discovery.
Yeah, she's a senior at Windsor High School and also goes to the Governor's School for Science and Technology 3 days a week. She also does research with a mentor at Hampton University's lab, and her research on Parkinson's disease led to a finding that could help scientists give them a new perspective on the disease.
Like most 18-year-olds,
when I do get free time, I either sleep.
Sleep can be so sacred. In her final year of high school,
I like writing poetry. I also go to my Indian temple a lot.
Like most seniors, Anjali Patel finds time for the things she enjoys. But she's far from your average teenager.
I spent my entire summer reading my mentor's publications and her research.
Her reading.
From the day that I started lab, I kept a journal of what I did every single day.
Prepped her for lab work at Hampton University and research on Parkinson's disease. As Anjali explains, there are 3 proteins involved in the onset of the disease. It's been known all are involved and how 2 of them interact. This is where Anjali's groundbreaking research comes into play.
The project was based on the interplay of how they play with each other in order for the disease to actually progress.
She figured out how the second protein, called tau, interacts with the third, known as TPPP25, completing this triangle shown in her presentation. Her work.
Yes, it's May 13th. That's the big competition.
Earning her a spot at the Intel International Science and Engineering Fair in Pittsburgh next month. It's the largest pre-college science fair in the world. Easy to say.
Oh my gosh.
She has some proud parents.
They've been actually my biggest supporters.
And she didn't have to look far to figure that out.
Now, Anjali says she plans to go to UVA next year, then hopefully medical school at Stanford. She wants to be a neurologist and also continue her research on Parkinson's. So if you want to hear more about her research, I have more from the interview that didn't air tonight. You can find that on my Facebook page. Janue, 13 News Now.
We have breaking news out of Norfolk tonight, where a man was shot dead in Young Terrace. This is going on right now on Nicholson Street near Brambleton Avenue. This is a live look at the scene. Officers arrived around 9:30 and found the man outside. Paramedics pronounced him dead on the scene. At this point, police have not released any suspect information.
State lawmakers returned to Richmond today for a special session called to pass the budget. The holdup is over the debate over expanding Medicaid. Lawmakers met dozens of activists today at the state capitol.
About 400,000 Virginians right now fall through some sort of a gap in coverage.
Expansion after years of opposition. This time, Medicaid expansion has a work requirement. In the House budget, the federal government would pay 90% of the cost of expansion, and the money Virginia saves would be reinvested. Senate Republicans don't like that idea. They argue that money allocated for health care should stay there.
Until they back away from their spending priorities and think that we're taking health care money and spending it on salary increases, it's not acceptable.
The House plans to pass the budget and send it to the Senate next Tuesday.
Two detectives help a man who had been shot in Portsmouth. Tonight, we've learned that the detectives were in the area working another case when they saw a man in the roadway bleeding after he had been shot in the leg. One detective used his necktie and police baton to make a tourniquet until they stopped the bleeding. Medics arrived. We brought you this as breaking news earlier. The shooting happened on Prentice Avenue. The man has serious injuries. Police do not have a motive or a suspect.
Tonight, the people of Algeria are in mourning after the worst aviation disaster in history in the North African nation. A military transport plane has crashed there today. 257 people died in the crash of that plane. It crashed into a field just after takeoff from a military base and exploded into flames. Soldiers and their family members were among those on board. There was no mention of survivors. One witness reported seeing people jump out of the plane before the crash. Others saw flames coming from one of the plane's engines before takeoff. Algeria's president ordered 3 days of mourning.
President Trump is threatening a missile strike against Syria. The president choosing to tweet about the strike after an alleged chemical attack. ABC's Maggie Rulli has the latest developments.
A missile attack on Syria now seems inevitable, but Russia threatens to shoot down any missiles fired on its ally Syria. President Trump tweeting, "Get ready, Russia, because they will be coming nice and new and smart. You shouldn't be partners with a gas-killing animal who kills his people and enjoys it." But despite those tweets, the White House insists no decisions have been made.
Why is the president telegraphing his military intentions on Twitter, announcing effectively an attack on Twitter?
Again, the president has not laid out a timetable and still leaving a number of other options on the table.
Those smart missiles with precision guidance systems based on lasers and satellites to pinpoint and strike targets with precision. The U.S. and Britain could have submarines in the Mediterranean armed with Tomahawks. A U.S. destroyer laden with Tomahawks is already there. A French warship off Lebanon's coast. French aircraft could launch from Jordan, the British from Cyprus.
We stand ready to provide military options if they're appropriate, as the president determines.
Among the options, striking chemical weapons storage airfields or Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's command headquarters.
Assad was given a warning a year ago. He didn't heed that warning, and so the president's going to have to go back in with something that's going to make more of an impression on Mr. Assad.
Satellite images show Russian ships sailing out of its naval base in Syria to help warn Syria of an impending attack. Maggie Rulli, ABC News, New York.
Senator Tim Kaine posted on Facebook in response to the president's tweet saying, instead of spending this morning taunting Russia on Twitter, he should be presenting a serious strategy to Congress. Kaine says any military action that is not self-defense is illegal.
Situation in Syria was top of mind as the Truman Carrier Strike Group deployed today from Naval Station Norfolk. More than 6,500 sailors are on board the aircraft carrier and the 5 surface ships. Tonight they're headed for the Mediterranean Sea and the Persian Gulf. This was a scheduled deployment and the crew had more than 8 months to prepare. The group's admiral says his team, well trained to do whatever is asked of them.
The president can send us wherever he wants with whatever mission he's got, and we're ready to go.
We have a good team. It starts from the CO down. Good chain of command and triad makes the team motivated.
Also deploying with the strike group, nearly 1,700 men and women in 9 aircraft squadrons. 7 are based in Hampton Roads. As those squadrons deployed, one was returning today. The Blue Blasters of Strike Fighter Squadron 34 returned to Oceana. They left in January to join up with the carrier Air Wing 2 aboard the Carl Vinson. While gone, the ship and Air Wing participated in a historic port visit to Vietnam, the first since the Vietnam War.
Only a few days left. Taxes are due next Tuesday, April 17th. Some people are sweating it out. The question tonight is whether electronic filing is safer than doing it the old-fashioned way, filing by paper. ABC's Rebecca Jarvis has these tips to make sure your tax filing is safe from scammers.
Tax day is quickly approaching, and in this increasingly digital world, more people are filing their returns electronically rather than mailing in paper tax returns. But how safe is it to electronically file your taxes? Electronically filed returns are encrypted to prevent access to data, making them safer than paper returns. Mailed-in returns can get lost or stolen, but by e-filing, you'll have quick confirmation that your return has been received by the IRS. But tax season means scam season for IRS impersonators. It could be an email or phone call from someone pretending to be an IRS agent saying you owe money.
So here's what we like to say. If the IRS is calling, hang up.
Scammers may demand immediate payment, something the IRS would never do.
The IRS is never going to reach you for the first time about a tax debt via a phone call. They're going to send you a letter.
And if it turns out you do owe, the IRS is happy to take a check.
IRS would never ask you to go put money on iTunes cards in order to pay off a debt.
The IRS is also working to combat scammers using someone else's social security number to file bogus returns. Anyone who's been the victim of tax identity theft will need a PIN to file their federal return, and as part of a pilot program in Georgia, Florida, and Washington, D.C., residents of those states can request a PIN even if they have not been the victim of tax fraud. Rebecca Jarvis, ABC News, New York.